Alright, so I know that I just did the summer sale pickups last week, so this video feels a little bit superfluous. However, the truth is, I still got some pretty great games that did not necessarily go on sale during the Steam summer sale, and they still deserve mention as well. So here are some games that are just, a whole lot of fun in their own right, and also perform well on the Steam Deck to boot. And while I normally try to lead with something that's pretty lighthearted, for this first entry I figured I would just go full-blown horror with a first-person Silent Hill simulator of sorts, and that would be Lost in Vivo, which was recommended to me by my good buddy Ryan. Now, unfortunately, it did not go on sale during the Steam summer sale, but, it's still pretty affordable at $11.99, so let's take a look. First off, when I call this game an homage to Silent Hill, I don't necessarily mean that thematically it perfectly aligns with occult activity or anything. Rather, it just wears its influences on its sleeve and doesn't come off as derivative in the slightest. The premise is that you're taking your service dog for a walk during a storm, and sadly your dog buddy gets washed down a busted sewer drain. Shortly thereafter, you do the only logical thing and descend through the nearest entrance to the sewers to look for your friend. Although it doesn't take long after your descent to find that something is definitely wrong here. Along the way, you'll find yourself traversing a variety of environments that feel like genre staples, from dank sewers to a labyrinthine subway system, and also an apartment building. And each new environment I found myself in offered its own subtly unnerving moments. I won't spoil a ton of the scares, but one in particular I did want to highlight that freaked me out in my initial time with Lost in Vivo happened right after I'd gotten deeper into the initial sewer level. You have a dedicated button for whistling to try and find your missing doggo. And every time you whistle, you'll hear barking come back at you with some very well done directional audio to sort of guide you along the right path. So you can imagine with big fluffy headphones on playing this late at night, my surprise when I let out another whistle only for this to happen. Oh, I don't like that at all. Ooh, that's so Ghostbusters 2, I hate it. That gave me chills so fast, and Lost in Vivo is excellent at doling out these little morsels of terror. Whether that's some oppressively unsettling audio that disorients you in its maze-like environments, or subtle visual cues that make you do a double take to question what you're seeing, it's all very effective. I won't say that there were no jump scares, but the ones that I did encounter felt organic rather than thrown together in some hackneyed sort of way. I'm not sure how great the story will be as I'm still within the first 4 levels or so, but the gameplay feels absolutely solid as a horror experience. You're fast but not too fast, vulnerable but not so squishy that progress feels like a chore, and there are just enough safe rooms scattered about to give you a brief respite now and again. As performance goes, once you get into it, everything performs quite well, although I did have a couple of minor issues to contend with. The first is that the controls weren't 100% ready to go out of the box, and I did have to download a community layout and tweak a few of the bindings to get everything working the way I wanted to. And the other issue I encountered was that initially, for reasons unknown to me, the sound was completely silent, but only after I entered the sewer level. At first I thought this was some artistic choice, but after looking up some footage I realized something was wrong. A restart of the game didn't fix it, but after switching to Proton Experimental and then doing a restart of my Steam Deck, I never encountered the issue again, so if it seems eerily quiet to you in like a bad way, you might give this a shot. Beyond that though, everything worked great. Lost in Vivo has shown itself to have a great grasp of horror fundamentals, and I absolutely can't wait to spend more time with it even if I did frequently scream like a small child. Next up, let's move on to a game that feels as though it should be chock full of macabre horror, but ultimately ended up being a charming, heartwarming tale about a recently deceased museum creator, I Am Dead. I Am Dead starts off optimistic and leisurely as you take a stroll along the shore of Shelmerston, a small island in the North Atlantic. You'll play as Morris Lupton, who just recently found himself joining the ranks of the deceased, although he doesn't seem to mind all that much and muses about the island and its uptick in tourist activity. It's hardly a high-energy way to kick things off, but that's perfectly appropriate as this falls firmly within the realm of experiential games more than anything. It's quiet and soft, allowing a touching story of someone who loved his home to start piecing together the story of other residents of Shelmerston in an attempt to divert a catastrophe that I won't spoil here. And while Morris seems fairly isolated in his quest initially, as he wanders back to the museum, it won't take long before more characters start to pop up. At first, based on the opening, I sort of figured this would be a walking simulator, and while you do move around a little bit, it's more often solving environmental puzzles through a fun ability Morris has called slicing. This allows you to effectively zoom into or out of objects to see what they contain. And as you get deeper in, you'll find that you can read the thoughts of some of Shelmerston's still living denizens. Armed with this ability, you'll learn little story bits about some of the other hosts around the island, and in turn use their memories to track down mementos hidden in various locations. The more you explore, the more stories you unravel about those who shared the island with you in life. At first I was worried this gameplay loop might come off a little bit tedious, but it's been anything but thanks to a few distinct things that I Am Dead gets right. The first is just fun, engaging writing. Characters that only get maybe 3 minutes of in-game storytelling total still manage to come off as deep, fully realized people within its world. Complementing these stories is that the voice acting is exceptional, both in its execution and, technically speaking, it all has a warm, rich sound to it that plants I Am Dead firmly within the cozy games category. And finally, even though you're effectively playing a narrative-driven hidden object puzzle adventure, the act of slicing into and out of the environments feels great. Controller feedback pops at just the right moment as you bring a story beat into sharper focus while investigating, and rotating the camera around its diorama-type environments is smooth and responsive. Speaking of, performance is completely top-notch with a butter-smooth experience, and I had no controller or optimization issues to speak of as I dove in. It's easy to pick up and play and, well, just get lost in, really. And as someone who just loves storybook-centered games with richly developed characters, I Am Dead just seemed to hit all the right notes for me. So if you're someone who appreciates a slower, more poignant narrative adventure, or if you just want a lighter break between more complex games that you might be tackling, I Am Dead should at least be on your radar. Although if you're in the market for a more complex game and looking to scratch an arcade itch the Vampire Survivors instilled within you, then you should definitely take a look at this next title, Scarlet Tower. Full disclosure, this wasn't technically a pickup, but rather was provided via keymailer by the developer Pixaralia, which I do hope I'm pronouncing correctly. And at its core, this is another Vampire Survivors-like, meaning you can expect a ton of on-screen enemies to contend with as you throw down in this top-down gothic horror adventure with a roguelike structure. Everything you'd expect to be here is completely on point. Movement and attacks are effortless considering this type of game can be played mostly with just the sticks or minimal button presses, and you can expect legions of enemies to swarm you from all angles as you get progressively more and more powerful. Although it does distinguish itself from Vampire Survivors by offering what feels like a deeper experience with more RPG elements in play. As you continue to level up or find chests scattered around the map, in turn you'll have lots of options for how you want to build up your character in each run. Initially I went for a more vampiric route, as I set out initially with a more melee-focused build with Velat, but then later on I explored a ranged build with Nin, an elementalist. Speaking of build options, one of the things I liked was how quickly the game rewards you. There's a solid sense of progression in Scarlet Tower because even though you do have to start a new run every time you eventually succumb to the Horde, it seems like each time I bid it, I was pleasantly surprised that I had either unlocked new characters, completed quests I didn't realize I was on, or unlocked a ton of achievements commending me for thwarting X number of slimes or surviving for a certain amount of time. Visually, the style's definitely familiar with its chunky pixel art aesthetic, but I have to say I really love the particle effects for the various armaments you can equip throughout each run. Games like this live and die by how juicy the experience is. It's pretty much essential that games with hundreds of things to track visually provide appropriately satisfying feedback in their animations and sound design. Thankfully, Pyrexelia definitely understood the assignment, and true to genre expectations, it's just a big, loud slot machine of a video game that's not too dissimilar to something like Dynasty Warriors. Just be ready for your brain to be absolutely carpet-bombed by an unending barrage of info, which honestly makes these feel less like games and more like you're interacting directly with a dopamine dispenser. And yet, for all of the chaos on screen, the deck never misses a beat. It all runs perfectly smooth, and like other pick-up-and-play titles, is a great fit for the platform. So if you're at all a fan of games like Vampire Survivors, Brotato, or Gunlocked, there's a good chance you'll find something you like here as well. And while we're on the subject of chaos, albeit some of the more candy-coated variety, next up is a game that I got in last month's Humble Choice and I was really pumped to give it a whirl, LEGO 2K Drive. So I was completely uninterested in this game initially, but not for any real reason, just kind of a gut feeling. For starters, I had LEGO 2K Drive confused with the LEGO Speed Champions DLC for Forza Horizon 4 that came out I think around 2019 or 2020, and I honestly wasn't sure if this was a full game on its own or an expansion or spin-off from some other 2K racing game. All of this is to say I kind of glossed over it, assuming it might be up to some microtransactional nonsense, which typically leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Now, not every microtransaction is bad or anything, but whenever I get a whiff of any sort of add-on monetization, it's a pretty quick turnoff. Thankfully, I totally misjudged LEGO 2K Drive and had a blast pretty much from the jump for the most part, even if that first menu screen looked a little cluttered and suspect. There are a variety of game modes on offer when you go to start playing, but I went straight to story mode since that's what I was most interested in. The setup is that you're an up-and-coming racer in Bricklandia who's on a mission to become a champion, and thanks to the Sky Cup Grand Prix, you might just have a chance. After teaming up with Clutch Racington through a little early game tutorial action, you'll be free to start driving into a whole variety of races and activities, or just cruise around the open world, which honestly isn't too dissimilar to playing Forza Horizon. And all of it is steeped in that vibrant LEGO aesthetic and completely on brand with its irreverent, self-aware humor. As for the racing itself, clearly this is an arcadey take on the sport, so you can expect some extremely forgiving cornering, and it doesn't take long to come to grips with how it controls. Making it even more fulfilling is the fact that your vehicle will automatically transform into the appropriate mode of transportation for the terrain that you're on. So if you head off-road, you'll flip into a four-wheeler instantly, and a speedboat will magically materialize underneath you should you feel like ramping into a nearby lake. It's a brilliant design decision that makes every direction you explore effortless to enjoy, and probably cuts out a lot of the frustration that might have otherwise permeated the LEGO racing experience. There's definitely some rubber banding, at least in the early races, where it seemed like even when I was driving well, the computer would just be on top of me almost instantly, but I wouldn't say it was egregious or anything. Performance on the deck is good, but not exceptional. Most of the time it will stay above 60 FPS if you put the global settings down to medium, but it does tend to fluctuate a bit. I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker or anything, but it's definitely noticeable, and with so much happening on screen, I guess it makes sense that it wouldn't be perfectly smooth at the highest graphical fidelity. Overall, I was hoping for a silly arcade racer, and LEGO 2K Drive gave me exactly that, with a huge helping of LEGO movie-style humor, which might not be for everyone, but I personally loved it. So if you like a good cartoony racer, or just want something competitive that might be a good fit for kids, then it's definitely worthy of your consideration. And finally, I had to put at least one retro throwback on here, and since Night Dive is top tier when it comes to breathing new life into 5th gen games, let's wrap this up on a hellish note with Doom 64. And I could have sworn I already had this game, and I did, but it was for the Nintendo Switch after I ordered a physical copy from Limited Run some time back. Thankfully, my buddy Ryan had an extra key kicking around and decided to provide it here so I could go ahead and check it out on the Steam Deck. And speaking of extra Steam keys, he did have a couple of extra that I'm putting on screen right now for you to enjoy. He did not need those games and offered them to me to go ahead and hand out on the channel, so enjoy that, and Ryan, thanks again. Now, Doom 64 was great when I first played it back in like 1997, and it still holds up pretty well today for the most part. A spin-off of sorts, this version of Doom was developed in 1994 by Midway Studios San Diego, albeit under id's supervision. It runs a different version of the Doom engine, allowing for new kinds of level geometry and dynamic lighting, which is on full display here as a moody, more atmospheric entry in the Doom mythos. It's definitely an odd duck in Doom's history, but one that I appreciate, and apparently it garnered enough of a cult following to warrant a remaster back in 2020. In all the ways that matter, Doom 64 feels like Doom. Even if it's more slowly paced, there are still plenty of high-energy gunfights, ambushes, and the maze-like level design that will have you scouring every nook and cranny looking for secrets, health, ammo, armor, and power-ups as you face off against the familiar denizens of Hell, like demons, pain elementals, and Hell Knights. Steam Deck performance is mostly good, although in my time I did see a couple of weird instances where the frame rate suddenly dropped from 60 to 40 for a moment. It was enough for me to notice, but not pervasive enough that it wrecked the experience or anything. It was just kind of surprising, given that I can play Doom Eternal on the Steam Deck at ultra settings and have it play butter smooth. It's definitely got a different vibe than most any other Doom experience. But ultimately, if you're someone who enjoys soaking up an unsettling atmosphere and methodically exploring complex level structures, Doom 64 certainly delivers an interesting, if somewhat underrated bridge between the original and modern Doom entries. Alright, so that's it for this one, and honestly, I'm still feasting on the Steam Summer Sale as of this recording, so I'm sure the July pickups video will be a lot of fun whenever I get there. As far as what else is coming up on the channel, I will be doing a Let's Play style video. It's about 30 minutes long of Angerfoot, and I'm not sure if that's, something that will be a permanent fixture of the channel necessarily, just something I thought I would try out, kind of test the waters with, as it were, and then beyond that, also wrapping up the Witcher glasses review, which are rapidly becoming like my favorite accessory for the Steam Deck, but we'll get to that when the video comes out. For now, is there anything great that you picked up in the month of June? If so, I would love to hear about it. And as always, thank you so much for your time. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you on the next one.